And the last time Hazel and I talked, we talked about doing an interview like today. So here we are.
Yeah.
So Hazel, how do you understand this when this happens? It happens so frequently. I think on my birthday, I was walking around and I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to hear from Hazel today? And what do you know? Within 15 minutes, I got a call from Hazel.
Because you were able to feel very good about it, feel at ease about it, and then continue on throughout your day, you allowed it to be without even being aware that you were allowing it to be until you saw that it was done. And then you thought to yourself, I just thought about that. But you never want to neglect giving yourself enough credit that you are the one that created that before it happened. And you'll find that you do it all the time. You'll speak about someone, they'll appear, they'll call you, they'll think about even the food, and all of a sudden someone's bringing it to you, or they're even telling you they're eating it themselves, and you'll say, I was just thinking about it. So you are creating daily at your finest when you're doing it with ease, without force. A lot of times, some people say, well, why can't I create $1 million? Well, you're creating it, but you're in that moment thinking of why you can't the moment you just said it, and that's why it's not presenting itself. So to not overstimulate you, this is why I call you in those 15 minutes.
Well, I love that, just the reminder that we create our experience. And I think, part of what happens is that, people are thinking about the big things, right? Like, oh, I wish I had more money, or I really want to get married, or I really want to have a child, or I really want to develop my career. They're all thinking about the big things and trying to manifest something with the big things, but they're not paying attention to how they're creating all these little what you could also call sort of small coincidences, or people think of them as coincidences, right? But they aren't aware that of how much they are creating their daily experience. So they don't acknowledge or own the power that they have, that is evident every day.
Every day. And not to mention, we're doing it every second, whether we realize it or not. So you'll have millions and millions of creations that you have floating, and you have that backlog, right? So as you go into the next day, you'll say to yourself, man, well, I thought about that a week ago, and here I am doing it. Well, that's just how intensive your backlog is. It's coming, and you don't need to dwell on it. Once you send that desire out, know that it will be. You don't need to keep dwelling on it. That causes confusion, and you start creating a lot of lack that happens a lot quicker, because you never can forget how your emotion and the way you feel really plays a part in how fast it is to be. That is critical. So you have your backlog at play. You have everything that's backlog that you've desired coming to you. And then a lot of times you got the skip line, right? Where you'll be feeling so intensely about something, even if you're crying about it. A lot of times you got to be aware that you'll be crying so intensely that all of a sudden the whole day goes to the cahoots, because you're really giving so much power to that sadness that is amplifying it. So you can do the same thing with your joy. You can wake up feeling so good and so happy and watch how a lot of those good things start amplifying from that joy. You'll lay down that night and think, man, I had an excellent day. So your emotions really play a part in how fast you're creating also. But it's all for purpose. It all comes in due time. It all comes, but nonetheless, it's coming. That's never to be forgotten.
So Hazel, I have a question for you. In my profession, trained as a psychotherapist with as a psychiatric social worker, the primary way of or assumption that underlies a clinical practice is that a traditional one, let's just say a traditional or conventional one, is that there is such a thing as a normal, healthy person. And that when people are troubled or, having, as you say, or they're feeling very down, or they're feeling very anxious, or they're having trouble doing what they want to do, or their behavior is causing problems for other people, the assumption is that there's something wrong with them. And, that these differences are an abnormality, and that there's something that needs to be cured or fixed. What does that make sense to you?
Well, they're saying there's a problem, so therefore there is a problem because they're creating it, right? So when you tell someone that they need to be fixed, either one of two things happen. They believe it and they feel broken, or they say, no, I'm not broken. You're the one that needs to be fixed. So it boils down to how the person they're saying that to is going to receive it, but I prefer to go a different direction with that myself when I am encountering two people that are affecting each other's world in a way to where the other feels as though the other is causing the problems, and for me, I know that it's always a misunderstanding of communication, two completely different views going on. And if you ask each one what happened, they both would have a different story because they're either both upset about something, and one is either reacting very intensely, but there's a lot of finger pointing going on. So for me, I always want to embrace both sides of the story to really try to find balance and start there. So it depends on each individual situation. And I look at each situation as that. Don't compare it to another. I look at it as an individual and try to figure out what's going on. So if you were to tell me that you spoke with John and he's broken, well, I will need to speak with John myself and figure out why you came to that conclusion. But most importantly, see how John feels about himself. So there are so many different reasons why someone would call someone broken. But one thing's for sure, everyone pretty much has someone that they've called broken, and that person's called them broken back. So who is really broken?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think since I was young, I had this sort of natural inclination or ability to sort of to see things from other people's point of view, right? And so if someone's, I was very rarely actually bothered by someone else's behavior, even if it was not what other people expected or thought was normal. I just thought it was interesting, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
the I do think I think when I was young, I was, what would you say? I was very introspective and um, um, and sometimes kind of in a I guess I you could say moody. I don't think other people would have called me moody, but looking back at it, I don't know. I had a certain way of thinking about things that was probably, more related to the w- ways that maybe my parents thought about things. So, um, but when I started to work with people as a therapist, I really just became curious. I mean, I was just always curious about what their experience was. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually really believe that I could cure somebody, right? Or there's a phrase in the world of psychoanalysis really, but it's also become part of psychotherapy, uh, is to have a corrective emotional experience. And I never felt like I was capable of, giving someone more important experience than they had with their parents, right? Or to be the right, to be the to whatever, be the perfect parent to an adult client. Didn't make any It never made any sense to me. So for me it was really, I think what I had to offer people really was more my curiosity and my interest in their experience. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really ever think that I, could cure somebody or fix them. Um,
There's never a burden you want to take on. That person always must find that within themselves, because they need to live out their own life experience to be able to make their own decisions, to be able to come to their own conclusions. So it's always interesting to listen to what led up to them making that decision. And most importantly, what decisions are they wanting to make going forward? So it's always about going forward and using your past as not something to feel down about, but for something to feel good about that experience, loving that you survived it, and to go forward and always focusing on what it is you're wanting to do. And a lot of times people can get very caught up and overly talking about the bad experiences to where they keep reliving it, and not speaking enough about what it is they desire. Because you want to speak about what you're desiring, what you're wanting, so that you can always be creating that, and having all of that coming for you as you go through your future and you go forward. So you want to be a little weary about that, using past experiences for growth and strength, regardless of what it was. And you have to really always navigate someone in that direction, So it's never about fixing them, it's helping them feel good about the experience in a way that is not so saddening, but more empowering, and focusing more on where it is they're wanting to go.
it's a
And if they don't know, right? Because sometimes you'll encounter that, right? You just don't know. You feel like, well, all I know is sadness. I don't even know what goodness to think of. Then what would you like to do in this moment? You focus on that moment. Ask them what they would like to just do right now, and allow them to focus on that just to keep it easier. But everyone's completely different. But to take on the burden of trying to fix someone is a burden you won't be able to accomplish.
right. Um, it's at any rate, I'm thinking about this too. Is that my sometimes people want to focus on what is, painful, or how they get really kind of caught up in how things aren't right, or someone didn't treat them right, or a parent, you know, they don't understand their parent. So I was talking to a young man today who's, has a young child that he's just totally enamored with. And he doesn't really talk to his father. And his father is really uh, uh, just never really gets in touch with him. And he can't understand how his father could have had a child the way he does and ever get to the point of not wanting to talk to that child. And it's very hard for this young man to see, to accept this about his father. So I think that's an example of someone who just, in a way, gets caught in the negative feelings about that situation.
Mainly they're feeling that way because they're wanting that person to be who they are wanting them to be. They need to separate that. They are who they are, and their father is who their father is. And you want to accept that because that's what it is. Their father is completely okay with not talking to them every day. They're fine with that, right? That's what they're doing. And you can't expect your desire to be everyone else's desire. So the fact that you decided to speak to your child every day, that was your desire, and you want to bask in that. Enjoy that because you're living out what you're wanting to do. But to force your desire upon someone else just because you're believing is right, whether it's right or wrong, that's not the question. The point is, this is just how their father chooses to live. And they want to be able to embrace that difference. That's all they can do. Know that their father doesn't speak to them every day. No, that's the way he is. That's the way he's always been. Right? You want to embrace the difference. It does not mean you have to like it, but you can't change it. And you don't want to tell them how they need to live their life because that causes more conflict. The father's at peace doing it the way that he believes is best and easier for him. It's his life.
Right.
Even what the son doesn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
That's his father's choice.
Now,
we all have our free will. It doesn't mean that we like the decisions that everyone makes. But we have our own free will. So the son needs to separate that. Needs to separate it.
So we are going to have to take a break in a couple of minutes. But I want to just, one thing that happens that you are very good at, and which is one of the reasons I enjoy our conversation so much, is that you can often hone in on really what the heart what's really going on between two people. And sometimes you can see that things are really okay. And other times you can see that, oh, this really isn't a good situation. And it's interesting because in my work, I've worked with a much more analytical approach. But what I found as the years went on is that I would get a very strong sense about a situation and about what was important about it, because I could see that there were many variables and that logically, there was not a particular logical way to choose which of these 20 variables or aspects of a person's situation was important. So what I found is that I was, in a sense, using my intuition. I started to call my analytical template my tea leaves, right? I would look at them, but then what was important would pop out. So we're going to take a break now. And when we come back, I want to hear how you started to develop the intuitive aspect of your work with people. This is Mercy Russell with a Remarkable Relationship Show. And today my guest is my friend Hazel. We're talking about the use of intuition in our daily lives.
Have something important to say? Want to help improve our world? Need to promote your business uniquely and effectively? KKNW is the answer. Our staff helps broadcasters and podcasters create professional sounding audio. Bring your talent and let our experts help you craft a radio show or podcast that best delivers your message. Learn more at 1150kknw.com. That's 1150kknw.com. KKNW, talk variety that's live and local.
Hi, tune into my new show, The Remarkable Relationship Show, with me, Mercy Russell. I bring a fresh perspective on all things related to how humans develop their individual brilliance while navigating the excitement, stickiness, and resistance in their relationships. Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m., and you can visit my website at leadershipwithmercy.com.
Alternative Talk 1150, the talk of the sound.
Hello, good morning. This is Mercy Russell with a Remarkable Relationship Show. So today I'm talking with my friend Hazel, and we're talking about just the use of intuition in our daily lives. I was just speaking with Hazel about how I started to notice the way I was using intuition in my work as a psychotherapist, and how I was trained in a very sort of, science-based clinical approach to helping people who are, coming for therapy. But as time went on, as the years went on, I started to notice how I was using my intuition to decide what to talk to people about and how I could, how to approach their concerns. So anyway, that was what I was sharing. And so now, Hazel, I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about how you developed you're a master in the intuitive arts, and so I'm sort of more advanced than I am. But I just wonder, how did you begin to develop or use your intuition? How do you understand it? Well, how would you describe it?
Well, I wouldn't say develop, right? More aware. So I I started becoming very aware that I was able to feel the emotions and have a knowing, a clear knowing. I would hear a clear knowing of something before it happened. And I say aware because as these thoughts would come to me and I see it play out, I would say to myself, wow, I I knew that. And then I became aware that when I am around certain groups or when I go in certain stores, I can always identify the emotions of ones that are within my vicinity, or if I focus in on one person, I would I would get a certain knowing about them. And it's as if it just comes. So it's more of an awareness. Now, as I became more aware of this, I I realized that I should say something. So I started doing that. And I noticed that until things play out, it is very difficult for some to really embrace what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned to realize that there is no need for me to ever attempt to force someone to believe what I'm saying. Allow them to just live it, you know. And if they choose to do something different, then wonderful. And if they don't, then that was for its purpose. And the next time they will be able to make a different decision, you know. So as I became more aware, I just started embracing it and listening to it. And there are moments where it can be intimidating because I can also become aware of a feeling that something is also about to go wrong. So I have to learn to embrace that part also, right? And I have to also be able to embrace that no matter what it is, even though it's not feeling right, I will be okay and I will overcome it. So I started looking at that feeling differently, you know, and I come to realize that feeling even allows me to start even being able to create at my finest because I start having such counteractive thoughts to that feeling that I am able to shift things around by just not letting that feeling become so abundant. You know, so it becomes very complex. So to answer the question, I became more aware and I embraced it. And I live by it. Even when it's something that I do not like, that I know, because there is good and there is bad. You know, we always have that law of harmony. And I know that the bad is also serving its purpose and that the good will always counteract it, you know, and I find such peace in that. And it allows me to be able to handle moments that a lot of people would get really caught up in and find very devastation. I find to be a strength, you know, and I grow from it, and I know there's no gain in dwelling on it, and I just love my awareness of that, and I just live it. So I wouldn't say developed, I more became aware, and as I became aware, I embrace it, and I just embrace it with just pure intent, going with the flow, but most importantly, it's never more than you can bear. No matter what, never more goodness than you can handle, never more badness than you can handle.
It's interesting what, you know, listening to you talk, I'm reminded of the time when I decided to become a therapist. And I had just moved to New York City, and I was looking for a job, but I wasn't employed yet. And I I was reading a book called What Color is Your Parachute? It's probably in its 15th edition by now. And one of the questions they asked was, if you had, all the money you needed and you didn't have to work, what do you love to do that you would do? I mean, this was a way of choosing your career. And at the time, I was spending a lot of time alone because the friend that I was staying with was working up in Albany. She wasn't in the city. And so I didn't have a job yet, and I didn't have any money. So I was really just sort of walking around the city, and I love New York City. So I love the energy. And I was a young woman, and I would just sit and watch people go by. I would just, big people watcher. I just kind of sit on somewhere. I'd find a place to sit on the street. And I remember at lunchtime somewhere, just watching people walk by, and every person that walked by, I would get a picture. I would, in my mind, of what they were thinking about, where they were going, what they were doing, something about their life. And I thought of it as a game that I was playing because I was so curious about the inner world of people walking around. And it reminds me of this scene of, I think it's Bruce Willis is an actor in the movie. Of course, I can't remember the name of it, but he walks through, Union Station or Penn Station, and, he sees this man who's a criminal, and he looks at him, and he gets this whole hologram picture of his life. It's kind of a magical thing. And, but that's how I felt it was for me. And it was also sort of a game I played. And that's when I decided, oh, well, I'm just really interested in what's going on inside of people. I should become a therapist. And the other thing was, my favorite book when I was about 12 or 13 was about a girl who got hit on the head. And when she got hit on the head, she could hear the thoughts of other people. And, it created kind of a drama. And then she eventually got hit on the head and lost it again. And I just thought that was amazing, that would be the most amazing thing, would be to hear the thoughts of other people.
It can be very stimulating.
Uh-huh.
Very stimulating.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to hear what people are thinking. It's another thing to see their life in a bigger picture of their life, right? And sometimes bigger than what they can see, because, of course, it's sometimes easier to do that. It's usually easier to see that for other people than for ourselves.
This is accurate. But you always want to focus on your bigger picture for yourself. You never want to lose focus of that. But it's very interesting to be able to also, imagine another world too. But always make sure you're allowing yourself to have lots of manifestations for your world more than anything.
And what I did, I think at the time I started reading. I started reading Carl Jung, and I was always interested in my dreams. So that's when I started to get interested in dreams and to kind of keep a dream journal. And then I worked for a psychoanalyst. And I think as my whole career was developing, and then I went, into school to become a clinical social worker. But it's interesting because I think that that intuitive part of me was not what I was really paying attention. I was paying attention to learning this framework and this knowledge that was basically taught in medicine. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And
That's what makes you so wonderful. You're able to live that life experience and come to the conclusion from your intuition through those experiencing of knowing that there is more that you can help guide them to do. Mm.
Well, what's interesting, in one of the, I've spoken to some other people who I've interviewed for the show, is that I found that um, that this certain approach that I got very interested in, to, looking at family relationships over generations, brought out these experiences that were just totally, well, you might call them multisensory or unexpected. And what it really showed was the energetic connections that we have to other people, even if they're not alive, right? Or to places that we haven't been, but our family has been. We go there, we have the same experience, that kind of thing, that our ancestors did. So I think as the years have gone on, I've really become really, as interested in the fact that kind of um, this kind of connection, and the energetic connection that we have, and the influence that we can have over our lives with the way that what we choose to see and how we choose to understand things, that has become really important to me. And I don't see it as a contradiction to, I guess, what I would call a systems way of thinking that looks at as broad a context as possible of that person in their life. So I don't see it as a contradiction, even though one is considered very scientific and the other one is, I'm talking about using my intuition more.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great combination of both to help them find that balance, and you're finding a way to merge both worlds to where it benefits that individual, so following your intuition in that aspect, is going to always benefit them, and that's always your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you're merging both worlds from your school learning and combining that with your intuition, with the person that's in front of you. Combining both, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the experiences I often have when I talk with you is that I'll be, worrying about something or curious about how something is going to turn out. And often when I have asked other people for advice, I might get a confirmation of something I already knew, but I hadn't quite articulated yet. Now, my experience with you is similar to that, in that I don't feel as if I'm being told something I didn't know on some other level. So if I say to you, I'm really worried about, such and such, and you might say, oh, I think that's really going to turn out just fine. I'll think, yes, I guess my mind is worrying about it because I don't see a reason. I really feel like, yes, that's how I feel too. So, it sounds like maybe I just go along with you, but I know that's not really the case. The case is that, that because I have talked to people who said things and I said, no, that's not right, But the other thing that happens when I talk to you is I get sort of, what would you call it? I, I get a lesson. You probably don't even know you're doing this, but I get a lesson in how to tweak my thinking in a way that's really more productive and that really brings me peace. And my logical mind might say, now, is that really true? Like, are you missing out on something if you look at it that way? And then, but it's always clear to me that it's just so much easier to see the situation from a perspective that is, I mean, I like to feel like I can empower people to trust themselves. And I often feel like when I'm talking to you, that's what happens to me.
That's always important, because a problem is no longer a problem as long as it's no longer affecting you, even though that problem is still present, So it's all in the way that you're able to view it, and look forward and allow yourself to just do something else, anything else. And you're able, and I love the way you worded it, you were able to bring yourself peace. You see, that was, even though that problem didn't go away, you were still able to bring yourself peace because it was no longer affecting you, even though the problem was still present, and that is always the key, and that's what's wonderful about what you do, because you're able to speak to someone, you're able to let them talk and let them see that the problem is not going to go away, but you don't need to be affected by it. And you're able to have peace by that, and you're releasing yourself of that burden of trying to fix something that you don't know how to fix in that moment, or change something that you don't know how to change in that moment. You just do not let it. You just don't let it affect you, And a lot of times you can almost feel like that could be too simple, but really, it's that simple.
I know it does sound a little magical in the world of, psychiatry and medications. And, I think sometimes these, I do feel like, there are things that are helpful to people, such as medications and particular treatments or approaches to therapy that are very specific, or very specific techniques. So I don't think it's all a matter of changing the way you see things or feel about them. Sometimes you need some help with that, wouldn't you say?
I only stay focused on what it is that I'm wanting to feel, and I live by it. A lot of times my family and other people will say to me, "You're never sick," and they're always sick, and they're always having to deal with these colds, and I tell them, because you're always worried about being sick. I say that to my sister. I say, you're always worried about it. And you are constantly sick, because that is the energy you're creating. And I say to them, have you ever heard me say, I'm worried about being sick? Have you ever heard me complain or show any type of concern about my health? I don't. I will not live by that. So I only say I'm feeling good. I feel wonderful. Excellent. I take no medications. I can't, no colds, no sickness. I only believe that, and I live by it. When you find yourself becoming concerned about certain issues, they will start to become quite evident in your world, whether you're wanting to acknowledge that you're creating it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But you really are. You're always the creator, whether you're wanting to believe it or not. You really must live by that and fully grasp and know it. No worries are needed. And any type of concerns or worry that you apply to yourself will become evident. You will start to see it within your world because you're creating it. So it's all in what you believe and what you create. If you're worried about it, it will present itself.
Hazel, what about grief?
Grief I defined as holding on to something that is overwhelmingly sad. Is that the definition you will agree upon also?
Well, somebody's grieving a loss, somebody having, feelings of sadness because of a loss of some kind, a death or some other big, important loss. I mean,
grief is always a choice. And I know that can come across as like, oh my, but this person's mother just passed away, right? They just passed away, and they should be grieving, but there is no gain in that. There is none. There is none.
Mm-hmm.
None. To continue to decide to cry and be sad is you wasting away precious minutes where you could have made a different decision. But it's always your choice to make. So if you felt that in that moment to be sad, then that is your choice. But one thing's for sure, doesn't matter how long you grieve, you will eventually want to smile. The law of harmony will always kick in.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone is choosing to feel that grief and feel that sadness, it's because they're focusing on what's wrong rather than what is good. They're giving all their emphasis to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it amplifies.
Sometimes
it's always a choice.
Yeah, sometimes the body, I had experience sitting at the bedside of a friend of mine who died, and she and I always talked about how our spiritual relationship was stronger than our physical one. We both felt a little like clumsy physically, we just felt like, oh, the spiritual world is just much stronger. But then when she died and I sat next to her, I thought, oh, okay, well, Marcia's gone, but she just left her body. And then all of a sudden I started keening, I started wailing. And this kind of funny wail that they call keening. And I was like, someone came in to look at me sitting next to her. And I was like watching myself going, this is crazy. Because I know she's not really gone. She just sort of passed over, right? But then I realized that it was in my body, that my body was reacting to the death of her body. And it was a very powerful experience I had. But it was one in which I realized, well, there is the body, it just...
Yes, so you want to, I define that as emotion, right? So as you sat there, the emotion took over, right? And you released it, right? So you want to be able to release that emotion. Never ever feel bad about the tears, release it. You're missing your friend, and there's nothing wrong with that because of the bond that you made. But you don't want to turn it into grief where it's overwhelming sadness. Release that emotion. Feel that emotion. That emotion allows you to know that you love that person, right? It's an acknowledgement. So the moment that you just described is more you feeling that overwhelming love. And if you felt that love for her, you released the tears. You felt the emotion of the sadness. But to continue to dwell on that is where it becomes grief.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to be able to do that. You want to release that emotion, and then feel good about all the memories and feel good about that relationship. But always acknowledge that we all have our time to go from our physical bodies, right? The physical body is temporary. We must never forget that. A lot of people will get caught up in believing that there's a certain expiration date and saying that maybe someone died too young, but really, no one has a date. You may be 2 years old, maybe one day you'll die. You may be 90 years old and you die, but we are all guaranteed that, so you don't want to get caught up in grief on that, because the moment you're born, you can die at any minute. No one's promised 20 years, 20 minutes. No one's promised that, so you want to always bask in the goodness and what it is. You love making those love bonds, but never let grief overwhelm you to where you're living in sadness. There's no gain in that. No gain in it.
So Hazel,
but what you felt was emotion.
Yeah, I think that's really, I love that definition of emotion. So at Hazel, our time is up. And I just want to thank you for joining us today. I always love talking to you, and I hope that my listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have.
You're wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And so this is Mercy Russell of the Remarkable Relationships Show. Today I've been talking to my friend Hazel, and our topic has been the use of intuition in your daily lives.